So tell me, do you have a green thumb or a pink thumb? Hi, this is Margaret Byrd, and welcome to Color Quest, and welcome to my in-house garden. Today on Color Quest, we're going to be looking how to start dye plants from seed in something as simple as a setup, right, in my instance, in my kitchen. So let's jump right in. It's a long video, lots of information, and hopefully it might give you some inspiration to try growing dye plants from seed. I know it's inspired myself to do it because this is something I've never tried, and it's pretty amazing to watch how plants come to life. So I'm going to run through quickly the different seeds that I'm going to try to turn into little seedlings and starts, and that is some really common dye plants: Calendula, Woad, Coreopsis, black hollyhock, Hopi black sunflower seeds, marigold seeds, indigo seeds, sapphire seeds, Weld, madder, and Amaranth. Now, a few things. I do not have much of a garden space. Some of these dye plants are really meant for the long haul, meaning that they need a few years to get settled into their environment before they start producing dye color. One, of course, is madder. Now, madder, you use the root for madder. So although I'm going to make starts here, this particular plant would not be ready for a few years. So I intend to actually give away various starts if I'm successful in growing them from seedlings, because I just don't have the ability to start a 3-year plant. However, things like indigo, for example, is a great potted plant. So I hope to be able to keep the indigo for myself. I don't know a lot about Woad. I'm kind of excited. Woad is another blue, so I'll have to read up about that one. But obviously Coreopsis will be great for pots. The Hopi and the hollyhock really need to be in a garden. Those are probably two of the seeds that I'm most excited about. So maybe I'll find a friend who has a garden space that I can at least watch them grow and we can harvest together. And then I've heard about Amaranth. I've seen a dyer or two suggest that they wouldn't necessarily grow these again, and that it came in the packet, so I figured we'll start some seedlings. And then we have Weld, which is the traditional yellow, and Safflower. All of these seeds are coming from Julie Sinden's Love of Color. Some of these seeds, you've seen videos here on Color Quest and the colors that they make. The marigold and the Coreopsis, I've had videos on those. They're wonderful. I had some on the Hopi sunflower seeds. I really loved those. The color is a beautiful color that comes from the seeds. Obviously indigo, I had freshly fed several videos on that, and have shown sapphire seeds in a video when I got them on my trip over to the Netherlands, and I put those into a hammered process of an echo print. Again, madder root. I played around with that, already processed, and that makes it beautiful orangish red. So those are the seeds, and we'll just give them all a go and see what kind of seedlings we can get. Now, one of the things that you will need is a way to identify the seeds that you've planted. It's really easy to forget them. So although you can use those plastic labels, I don't even know what they're called, my friend and incredible assistant today is going to hand make them. This is something she used to do when she was a kid, and so she said, let's make some homemade signs. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
What you do? So I just cut out little pieces of paper, and then I write down which of the seeds that we're going to be using, and after I write it down, I will then just tape, make a little sign, like a little picket sign.
Super cute.
Yeah, with Scotch tape on the back.
Yay.
And that will be that.
All right. Well, it'll be fun to watch you make it. So I noticed, Brianna, that you have a very specific way of putting the sign on to the tape.
Yes.
Or to the toothpick. So you just explained it to me, but
yes,
tell everyone out there.
So the way that I do it, I mean, it's not super important, but the way that I like to do it is I like to put the tape on top of the toothpick first instead of like placing the toothpick on the back and then taping it, because I like to have the toothpick kind of be where there's more tape past it, and then it's also easier to just put down and make sure that everything is nicely put on there.
It's a really clean and efficient way of doing it too, and it looks so nice.
Thank you.
Always clever new ways to do things. So I have rounded up all of the supplies that I'm going to need to build a small in-house setup to grow some seedlings. Now all of this material that I have here was through an online free instructional video and worksheet that I got from a place in Skagit County up in Washington State, north of me. It is an incredible flower farm called Floret Flower, and they have incredible resources for teaching about how to do all kinds of steps within your garden. So I pulled together the different materials I was going to need in order to do this. So obviously you need seeds. Then you're going to need to be able to identify the seeds. And my lovely friend made me these super cute homemade signs. So I didn't have to buy those plastic white plant identifiers. And we'll be using those because it's easy to forget where you plant things. That is for sure. Then I have a 3-part system here for the trays themselves. So I have the top, which is going to be needed when they're just starting. It keeps the condensation in and a nice environment for them to germinate and begin to grow. And then I went ahead and purchased a seedling tray. I chose this, which is called a 1020. It's got 72 spots, and I chose the ones that have the holes because I am going to do a bottom drainage and watering system since it's inside the house. So then it has a tray and I'll be able to put water in here when the seedlings need their water. So this is the tray setup that I decided to go with, thanks to Floret. Then I have 2 kinds of soil and another product that needs to be utilized. One is going to be a seed starter, and it needs to be a seed starter. That was made very clear in the video because there's special amendments and things that are meant specifically for seeds and starting. And then the vermiculite is going to be used to go on top, and that is really a helpful step that Flower recommends, especially if you've got different kinds of seeds, and some seeds need to be deep inside and others not. So the vermiculite is to go on top and help keep the seed happy but not too deep in the soil. Then I just happen to have a little trowel, which I'll need in order to wet the soil when I start, just a place for me to have some water to pour in. And then I'm going to just be mixing it up in this container that I have. I'm not gonna be able to do much at a time, but the soil that goes into the planters needs to be moist. So I will be wetting the soil and mixing it up in here to make sure it's a nice consistency, and then we'll start the process of planting the seeds. As I've disclosed, I've never done this before, so this is a learning curve for me. But you saw, we put in the water. To me, this feels like it's a little too wet. You can see the water just, it's a little muddy. So we're gonna add some more soil to it and mix that in a little bit more. We'll keep doing that until the soil is wet and really well saturated, but without being muddy. And that's gonna be just, I think, something that it's a feeling that you're gonna have, and what seems like a nice, evenly wet base in order to put the seeds in. And then we'll start filling up our little 72s. So we're just going to very loosely fill them. Florette says you do not want to pack them down. The little tiny seeds need an area that's easy for their roots to push through. So we will fill these up, not tamp them down. Two hands is working out better here. Trying to do this in the kitchen studio. I don't have a garden space really that's set up for this, so we are winging it with what we got and making a bit of a mess, but who cares? That's the fun of this, getting our hands dirty and trying something new. That is something I always love to do here and to share with all of you, because you're never going to learn anything if you don't try, right? So learn by doing. And I've been talking about making a dye garden or growing dye plants for so long and telling myself, I don't know how to do it. I don't have the right garden space. And that's just me making up a bunch of excuses. So push through those limitations that you set on yourself if you can. A lot of plants can thrive in pots. So I'm gonna go with it. You don't have to have a huge dye garden or a huge garden space in order to make a dye garden. One of the things that was recommended, since you don't want to tamp down the soil, is that you do, however, want to make sure that there's soil everywhere. So the recommendation is to pick up the tray and just kind of put it down like this, and the soil will settle and you'll be able to see areas where you need to add more soil. For example, like over here, it could use some more soil. And just a series of doing that a few times, and then we'll just know that we're getting enough soil in there without making it packed down. You can kind of see some of the other places where it could use a little more. So we'll just keep tamping and then filling until they're all filled up. The woman who owns the floret farm mentioned that the edge ones always end up with less soil because there's a tendency to not want to overspill. And since we're not doing this in a big trough or something where the soil can kind of go everywhere, or, you know, it's just my kitchen countertop. Yeah, the edges totally don't get filled. I see that. Human nature doesn't want to spill stuff. All right. So the first seed we're going to plant is indigo. And I'm super excited about this because it can be a pot plant, and I loved working with indigo so much this year, and I'm excited to try to grow my own. So on the back of each one of these are very simple instructions. For example, this one says, sow indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. Harden off before planting, out about 1 foot apart, and it grows best in fertile soil, which we have here in the state of Washington, and full sun, which in the summertime we do have some sun. And to keep it moist, that's for indigo. Now, one of the things about these different plants that may be more hardy in some other parts of the world is that you could sow some of these directly into the ground itself, but you're probably going to have a better chance of getting these seedlings to become plants by starting off inside. And here we have a frost, what's called the last annual frost or something, and there's a date for every state, and you can look that up online. And like, for example, this one's direct sow outdoors. I have heard that sunflowers don't like to be transplanted very well, but I'm going to try that anyway. And here's this as well, does not like to be transplanted. So I see that Weld is very much like our friend, the Hopi sunflower. So interestingly enough, I am still going to try it, see what happens, since I don't have the garden space. So anyway, the point is that each one of these seed packets has a little bit of instructions. You can probably find even more instructions online, but know that in a place like Washington State, we have a last frost date. I think the estimate's around the last week in March. And so you wouldn't be sowing these seeds anytime before that. Let me see, today's date, we are the very last week of February. And like, for example, this one says begin indoors 4 weeks before the last frost. So for example, Calendula right now is perfect timing, because if our last frost is around the end of March, we're at the end of February, this would give us about enough time. Now, I did chat with my friends over at the Color Farm today, and they mentioned that actually, this one's direct seed after frost. Sorry, Coreopsis, you're getting planted here. That if you start your seedlings in March or even April, they've even started seedlings as late as June, they said, that you're going to be fine. And they have found that their seedlings have done better a little bit later. So they are going to be starting their process in the middle of March. I'm actually going to be filming, going over and visiting them and seeing their process and see what they're up to in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be fun to just kind of see how they're doing it and talk a little bit more. But they did tell me today that, you know, don't be stressed, don't think you're doing this too late, and that there's plenty of time. So we're going to start right now with the indigo. And again, let's look at that instruction. So indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. So we're good on this one. We'll get those going first off and go from there. So seeds are all different sizes. So the indigo seed, as you can see here, is actually really tiny. So we are not even going to be planting this underneath the soil, but rather making a very tiny indentation in the soil and then placing one, maybe two. I'll show you how Floret shows planting tiny seeds. And then we'll be covering this with the vermiculite, which will give them a fighting chance to break through in the top and then work their way from there. So we'll start the process of making the holes. And if we want to start on one end, It would be a very tiny, not even like that, just a little house for it. And then what you can do is if you take them, well, you can do either one by one from your hand. It's kind of hard, but what Florette had recommended was that they will come out of the envelope. You can sort of very gently tap them in. And I'm talking very gently. I'm a little nervous to do it, that there's going to be too many. So we'll get some of these guys down there. There we go. There we go. And you can, do you see that one seed? And you can just sort of tamp them in and one seed goes in. Done. So we'll keep moving across and doing that little one by one. And if 2 seeds go in, it's okay. Not all seeds are going to germinate necessarily. You don't want to be over seeding. That one missed its hole there. And just we'll go through, and I'm only going to plant 72. I think I have close to 100 seeds in this particular one. And that I think is a common seed number, especially with these smaller seeds in a packet. And I will plant the 72, so I have just 1 tray of indigo starts. There we go. Keep on, keeping on. Now the vermiculite. We will be putting vermiculite on top of all of the seedlings, but it is particularly important here because we don't have any soil on top of our seeds. These seeds were so small. So we're going to be putting the vermiculite right on top and just covering it like a good coverage. Not super thick, but we want to be able to tell that the vermiculite is completely across all of it. And it can be across the whole thing. So you can just kind of sprinkle it on and then we can go back and add stuff. Yeah, perfect. And then we can just sort of make sure that it's covered. We'll probably add a little bit more to it and we'll do that across the whole tray. So the next one we're going to plant is calendula seed. And again, we'll look at the instructions, beginning indoors 4 weeks before. We're going to open these up, see what size they are, and repeat the process, but I'll try to show you at least the seed of each one that we plant so you have an idea of what each seed looks like and its size. Because the bigger the seed, the deeper it will go into the soil, and we will actually cover with a little bit of soil if it's a bigger seed, and then top with vermiculite over that. So what did you say about the calendula seeds?
They're kind of like spiral.
Yeah. Amazing how different seeds are, right? Look at those. So these are quite a lot bigger. So this will be a seed that we're actually going to put into the soil deeper and cover with a little bit of soil. Now you saw us using our fingers, which is a super easy way to go through and poke a little hole. You still don't go very far in. Or if you don't want to do that, you can also use like the head of a pencil. That's a tool that makes a nice hole size. and you can go and quickly make your hole. So that's just efficiency in doing something again and again. And then we'll put the seed in to the hole itself, and we're actually going to cover it with a little bit of soil. So we'll take a little bit of the other soil and just very gently cover the hole up like that. So we're placing all the seeds in first, and then we'll go back and cover with soil across all of them. And we don't have 100 seeds in this one. And so we're not even probably going to have 72 to fill, which is fine. We can go ahead and start the seeds of another plant with these. So you can go ahead and finish planting those. And this is where putting in your sign is going to be super important, because we'll end at a certain row. So when we finish Calendula, we'll be sure to put the marker exactly on the last row that we use. And then we'll just need to remember to mark the second half. It was recommended that it's super easy to forget to do this step, and then you forget what you did. I know I would. Now to cover the tops of where we planted the calendula seed. Again, we don't want to tamp down the soil at all. It's very loosely covered. Make sure they have a little bit of soil on top, and then very loosely on top we will put a little vermiculite. It's a nice light coat. Okay, so we have vermiculite down on the calendula, and then we have this amount left here, and there aren't a ton of hollyhock seeds in here, so I'm going to go ahead and use these next. I am so excited about these. I wish I had a better garden to grow these, because they're absolutely gorgeous flowers and they make such a beautiful dye. So again, looking at the back, they're telling us to sow the seeds indoors anytime in late winter. So this one's probably a pretty easy one to grow. I remember I used to grow these in Montana just from throwing seeds on the ground. They grew so well there, and they have the directions on what to do after you have your seedlings sprouted and your starts ready to go. So Brianna, would you mind showing the seed size? So these are the hollyhock seeds. They're quite a bit bigger, and again, they're more of like a disc shape. They'll be really easy to see when we plant them. We already poked the holes into the soil. I just went ahead and used the pencil because it was really easy to cruise through, but again, you can always use your finger. And Brianna's gonna go ahead and start planting those seeds too. We'll do exactly the same process. Put it in the hole, and then this one needs a little bit more of a hole. And then fill that with a little bit of dirt, and then top it off with vermiculite. All right, hollyhock and calendula, you are now buddies. We didn't have enough to do 2 full rows, so we went ahead and did them across, and then we will make note that those 4 fit the hollyhock. Next up is the madder seed. And again, just to reiterate, madder seeds are something that take about 3 years to have the roots strong enough and mature enough in order to harvest for this color themselves. You still recommend starting them indoors. So I'm going to go ahead and plant these, and then I'm going to be looking for people out there who might want a starter to plant in their own garden, and a place where you know you're going to be able to let them mature for about 3 years. So Brianna, why don't you show us how big those seeds are. These are the madder seeds. I love how every seed is such a different shape. It's so cool. So we don't have a lot of those in the packet as well. So we'll probably end up using the rest of these trays. We might not even need all of them. And we will have a nice mixed tray here of all these different kinds. These bigger seeds seem a little bit easier to sow. The indigo were so tiny, it felt a little stressful. putting the seeds in. They're like, how many are gonna be in there? The more you do it, the faster you get because you are a little less like nervous about doing it. And we've never done this before, right? Or at least I haven't. Have you started seedlings before, Brianna?
I have not, no.
So get a little more confident. So again, we're gonna go 2 rows down here. We didn't have that many, so we'll just complete it out over here and mark it off. So we said I think we said we were gonna put it there, I think.
Oh yes,
right
here.
So then we know, we're probably still gonna have to make notes. Next we're gonna do a safflower seed. And the one thing I wanna point out too is, although it says here to direct seed after frost, it also says it's also possible to start a month before planting. So almost all of these, even though the ones that say they like to be direct seeded, there is a little note that you can start seedlings before you plant them. The only one that I saw that didn't suggest that would be the Hopi sunflowers, and I do know that sunflowers do not like to be transplanted. So I will maybe plant 1 or 2, but these are really cherished seeds, so I might hold on to some of them and wait until I have a space outdoors, or find a friend who has some garden space. But otherwise, I think the Weld was the other one that wanted it to be direct. It says it does not like to be transplanted. So these 2, the Weld and the Hopi, I'm gonna have to think about it. I may or may not do the seedlings, we'll see. Maybe I'll do the Weld, but I may hold off except for maybe 1 or 2. Just play around with it a little bit. Okay, we're filling our next 72, and we'll start off with the safflowers. Show me the safflower. Curious. This is such a surprise. It's like Christmas. Oh, look at those. Wow. They're beautiful. They're like, kind of like white or sunflower seeds or something. They really have a hard shell. They look a lot like sunflower seeds, don't you think? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's get planting those. On to Woad, the friend of Indigo, the other blue in nature. Does not look anything like indigo seeds. They're like little, almost like little leaves, they look like. All right, so we've made a hole for these. We may have to stretch it out a little bit, but I guess I can kind of go in, let me, like that, that works. Okay, Coreopsis. They are one of the most incredible dye flowers, as you've seen in these videos, and they are in fact the tiniest seeds. They kind of look like the indigo seeds, so teeny tiny. So these won't require us to put any real, nothing more than a tiny little indent in the soil, and we will not cover it with soil, but rather just top it with vermiculite. We're making progress. Marigold is next. And these seeds are really pretty. They remind me of dandelion seeds, kind of, you know, super delicate. Those we will push into the soil, cover with soil and then vermiculite. Round it out. Amaranth seeds. Show me, Brianna. Teeny tiny little white seeds. They'll be really easy to see. We won't be putting them very deep. Okay, our final 2. the Weld and the Hopi both do not like to be transplanted. I'm gonna go ahead, the Weld seeds are teeny tiny. Since I don't really have a good garden, I'm just gonna go ahead and make some plants. And if they don't work, they don't work, and that's okay. We can try next time when I have some space outside to plant. And there are very few of these seeds in here, so I'm going to only do a row of 6, and I'll keep the other ones. I actually have a stash from the Hopi that I used in the fall to do some dyeing with, and I still have some of those, so I'll just add those into that mix there. I still have a handful of these 3 seeds that are left because there were just so many of them, and maybe I'll plant some more flats, but maybe I'll save them or donate them to another gardener. So let's go ahead and plant these last 2. Okay, so you're probably familiar with what the Hopi black sunflower seed is going to look like. And you can see they are in fact black sunflower seeds. And this is an heirloom crop. It is critically important crop for the Hopi people and is used in all different kinds of things within that culture. As you've seen on my videos, it also makes a beautiful purplish gray dye, and the Hopi use it to dye things like reeds and things that they weave and cloth and things. So it's a really important dye source. And last but not least, wow, you can hardly read that Weld. It's cool that it's yellow because Weld is actually yellow. And you know what? I'm just realizing each one of the packets, the lettering is the color of the dye. How clever. Let's put a shout out actually to the amazingly beautiful packaging that these come in. I would lie if I said that I wasn't somewhat attracted to buying these seeds because they're so beautiful in terms of the packaging, but I didn't notice each one of the lettering is the color of the dye source. Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Weld. All right, let's look and see. These guys are teeny. They look like poppy seeds, don't they?
Yeah.
I wonder if they're in that family. Be interesting to know. Every single one of these seeds has been different. So we're gonna try, I'm guessing one seed, it's probably gonna be a few more than one that goes into because we don't really have the patience to put one in each, and why not? So let's get planting. Okay. So we have all of the seeds that we were gonna plant today, and the next piece that we have to do in this beginning is we need to use these plastic covers. The plastic covers will keep the moisture in and provide it with a little bit more of a humid environment while they begin their germination process. The soil is moist, and most likely I won't have to water again until they start to sprout, but I need to check every couple of days. And if they end up needing some water, I'm going to be doing all of my watering through this bottom tray, and it will wick up through the bottom instead. I prefer to water things that way in so many ways, and it's just with seedlings that are so fragile, it's just an easier way. So I opted for that bottom watering option. So now I don't have a greenhouse, and I'm setting this up inside my house. And actually the temperature will work well for that because you need to keep these around 70 degrees as they begin to germinate and throw shoots up. So the next step will be to have these sitting in a shelving situation that I built that I will take you over now and show you. I wanted to quickly show you this little shelving system I set up. It's just something simple that I bought to have. I actually use it in my garage. I brought it into the house. The house here stays about 68 to 70 degrees, which is what these guys are gonna need to start the germination process. So with these tops on to keep them nice little humidity in there and the soil moist enough for them to begin their journey to become beautiful little dye plants. And then we'll check on the watering, but probably not going to need to do that while we wait for them to sprout up, and then we'll start the next step. And I want to say thank you to Brianna. You were such a great help, so thank you so much. So it's been about a week, not quite a week, and I was gone for several days. And when I got back from my trip, I checked and there were no little sprouts coming up. And then magically the next day, this happened. Every single one has something or multiple things popping up in them. These are blended, as you know, so they're different, growing at different speeds. I see a little bit of indigo there, little guys, and some are really sprouting up. Like, for example, the marigold is reaching for the stars. And then if I go down here, these guys are the Coreopsis, and they seem to be beginning to flourish. And these are the Amaranth. Look at those. So different, just like the seeds were different. So are the little sprouts. I guess that's to be expected. So now what I need to do is start checking the moisture of the soil. So just go in and very gently touch it. And this is getting a little dry. So I'm going to put some water down here inside. I've already done that with some of them. This one here already has some water in it. Hard to see. But trust me, it has water in it, which has kept these a little bit more moist. So I'll go ahead and add that to some of these other ones as they get dry. You need to just make sure that the soil continues to stay damp, and you can see that these covers, the role that they play is to keep the moisture in. And I don't know if you can see on this camera, but all of these little sprouts actually have a little bit of condensation on them. So you might be able to see it better here, which is really, really beautiful to see. Let me see, this one has condensation right there. You can see it. So these caps are definitely working. That's just a little bit of water there. So pretty. Ah, nature. So these covers definitely are doing their job. Let me add some water to the base of these, and I'll be checking them every couple of days to make sure they're staying moist. And then once they get really tall, we're gonna do the next step, which involves grow lights. Not put you through the torture of watching me try to put these together. The Floret Farm said it wasn't necessary to get specific grow lights, but these were pretty well priced, and they are the LED version. I liked it that it was only 2 feet long. She mentioned that you can use fluorescent lights, which I didn't know, but I figured might as well invest in these so that I can use them year after year. So I will put these together and get them set up and show you what that looks like. But my seedlings are begging for light. So my Hopi sunflowers are saying, please, please give us light. So it is definitely time to get the grow lights going. So that's where the video is going to end today. It is going to take several weeks, maybe even more than a month, for these plants to continue to grow inside this wonderful pink environment. And then I'll return here to Color Quest with some updates so you can see how it's going and where these plants are going to end up, either in pots or in various friends' gardens. I would put them in my small garden out back, but I have a lot of rabbits and they love to munch the freshest of greens. So it's kind of exciting. I think the lesson here, I hope, is that you push through any reservations you may have about the ability to grow dye plants in smaller spaces. Anything's possible, just gotta give it a try. Now, next week on Color Quest, I wanna take you on a little trip, and we're going to be looking at fully formed plants and beautiful pink flowers in a different part of the world. So join me as I travel south to Baja in Mexico, and we look at how to use bougainvillea in a fun project, especially geared towards travel. Look forward to seeing you next Friday here, and have a wonderful week. Now, on the back of each one of these seed packets, Julie has written a quick, this is kind of out of focus. Why is it doing